I know what you're thinking, you know. Well, Sam, I think you might be type 1 diabetic, but I'd really be a lot more convinced, since the word diabetic is in it, if you could just put on another couple 100 pounds. Y'all, when I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, I was so skinny. I saw a post of somebody, when they were diagnosed, they were 78 pounds. Uh, for me, like I'm like still skinny now, right? Like I'm not not like a big, bodybuilding kind of character. When I was diagnosed, I was more than 40 pounds lighter than you see me today. I was around 115 pounds, skin and bone. So, wait, you have type 1 diabetes, who are skin and bones, who are any size. It really doesn't necessarily correlate with weight in any way whatsoever. And even in type 2 diabetes, I believe it's around 20% or so, maybe a little bit more, maybe less. There's a substantial, even if it's a minority, percentage of type 2 diabetics who aren't even overweight. So you can't even assume that with type 2 diabetics, let alone with type 1. So we're getting this all the time. Type you don't look diabetic. And of course, what we're hearing is, oh my goodness, this person knows nothing about type 1, type 2, they're completely clueless. What am I going to do here? And then we have to think of a response, which you have to be clever sometimes. It could take, you have to be clever to get out of a situation where it's kind of uncomfortable or awkward, especially if that person is then going to go on and say all the things they know about diabetes. They think, you're not overweight. How can you be type 1 diabetic? They say, well, different type of diabetes. And then it's like maybe they don't even hear that, in one ear, out the other. And they say, well, for diabetes, we've got cinnamon, and you got to do this diet, and Gary Taubes, and, the 100 other things you should be doing. I have a friend who did this, and, oh, that's rough. I know somebody who they had this story. And you know, I think maybe it's rare if there's other communities, medical groups, whatever, that are feeling like there's lots of them and nobody knows about it. Reach out. We can make a you fucked up for whatever kind of, we can make another version other than Diacures, right? So, but for me here, it is important. So I'm going to give 2 points for this one. You don't know if type 1 diabetes um, you don't know what someone's weight is going to be just because they're type 1 diabetic. And we also don't know what it's going to be caused by in the end. Now, there's varying research, whereas type 2 diabetes, there's an etiology that you can sort of explain that being overweight would be highly relevant to the process of insulin resistance, because there's a number of mechanisms where that kind of, you can put two and two together. There's a lot of insulin resistance, whatever it is, the processes where fat is stored in the body. I'm limiting what I'm saying because I don't want to dive fully into type 2 diabetes etiology, rather. But the cause for type 1 is more or less unknown. That's what I'll say at this point. There's different ideas that it is caused purely genetically, or others think it's caused partially genetically. Like there's some genetic correlations, but if you have identical twins, you can have one of the identical twins develop type 1 diabetes and not the other. So there seem to be some environmental factors or causal agents. There's been some relatively disputed, in other words, not accepted by the mainstream. There's not enough literature to fully support any of these theories, but there's links with, this is more of a correlation, dairy. So there's some links that suggest kids, when there's a genetic predisposition, having dairy early in life increases as a risk factor for type 1 diabetes. There's links to organophosphate and other pesticides, and I think there's numerous toxicological studies, different angles. There was research in the 90s by a pretty famous guy, later disputed, not always replicated, connecting with vaccination. So that's a whole wing, with people feel a lot of different things about vaccinations. But I personally know somebody who feels that their type 1 diabetes was triggered. If we want to be sensitive, we could say not caused, but triggered in some way related to directly after the vaccine, they got sick. And then they became type 1 diabetic during that sickness. So it seemed to be highly related. Tough to ignore a story like that, especially when there is research showing a potential causal link there. So in general, and then we have the genetic discussion of could there be things that are changing our genetic? Can it really be genetic when it's exponentially increasing? So the whole field of epigenetics there. Any of the things that there's also viral connections, like I think rubella was linked and other viruses, Coxsackie virus, and potentially other stuff going on. So out of all of the potential links and risk factors, it's a situation where whether it's autoimmunity and your own cells are destroying, your own body is destroying the cells that make insulin, or potentially an outside factor like a virus or something is destroying those cells. But likely, it's viewed as an autoimmune condition where your body is destroying itself. Rough primer to autoimmunity, like thyroid is commonplace for autoimmunity. Some describe it that there's literally like a toxin or a problem where the area of the body becomes so messed up, so disturbed, that the immune system sees not only the infection or the toxin, the bad stuff that's there as the enemy, but your immune system starts to see your own tissue where the junk is embedded as the enemy, and it takes down your own tissue, attacks your own body. So none of that has anything to do with weight. That's been my rough kind of holistic manner of describing theories about type 1 diabetes causality. So it'd be really good if you just limited conversations about weight to those that have nothing to do with type 1 diabetes. That'd be real nice. Okay, thanks for watching.